Ready? If you're ready, say I'm ready. Okay, let's do it. Here we go. We are in our final week of a series that we have simply just been calling Citizens. And what we've been doing is talking about what it means to be a citizen of heaven and a citizen of earth, and how those two are in conflict with each other. And what do we do about that? And so we started our journey way back in the beginning in 1 Peter chapter 2 with this message from Peter. He says this: "Dear friends, I urge you as foreigners and exiles." Everybody say foreigners and exiles. Oh, come on. You guys are usually so much better at that. Let's say foreigners and exiles. I think the same people did it just louder. That's all right. Okay. As foreigners and exiles, to abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul. Now, it's an interesting concept of foreigners and exiles. So what does that actually mean? Well, just a quick definition we can grow from is this. Foreigners and exiles means to live life and journey in a place that is not your actual home. So let me be clear. This is not your home. This place is not your home. Yeah, but Pastor Tim, I was born in Sydney. I was raised in Sydney. I still live in Sydney. I've been here my whole life. You're telling me this is not my home? That's exactly what I'm telling you. If you're a follower of Jesus, this is not your home. And that's weird to me, because here's what that means. I've never actually been home. I've lived my entire life as a foreigner and an exile in a place that's not my home, because one of the things we've been saying over and over again is that we are a part of two kingdoms. Two kingdoms at the same time. There's this thing called the kingdom of heaven that when you say yes to Jesus, you're just a part of. You're a citizen of the kingdom of heaven. But we live on a kingdom called earth. And earth has its own agenda that many times is not in line with the kingdom of heaven. And it's a weird spot to be in, because every day I feel drawn more and more to the kingdom of earth. I worry about earthly things. I care about earthly things. And then there's this call from the kingdom of heaven that says, don't lose sight of what's most important. Don't lose sight of what really matters, Tim. And it's not the things of this earth. Because one of the things that we have to come to terms with as believers is that embracing our exile is part of following Jesus. We have to learn to embrace our exile. Not just go, well, I love all the stuff over here, but I'm still I'm a Christian. I go to Connection Point. I'm totally a Christian. Right? That's not how it works. When you're a follower of Jesus, what you realize is that the thing that is the most prioritized for our entire life, until we stop breathing, is Jesus. And we fight the good fight every day to keep him number one. Because we're a part of two kingdoms, and embracing our exile is a part of following Jesus. Well, if I'm not a part of this kingdom and I'm a part of a citizen of another kingdom, what kingdom am I actually in? We've been referring to this kingdom as Babylon. All throughout Scripture, Genesis, there's a story about God telling people to go through the earth and scatter and multiply. They decide they don't want to, so they create something called the Tower of Babel, which becomes Babylon. You get further along, fast forward 2,000 years, and you end up with this guy named Daniel. And Daniel is a Jew, and King Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, comes into Israel, destroys the temple, and takes a bunch of Jewish people back with him as slaves. One of those is Daniel. Daniel now is literally in Babylon as an exile. You get to the very end of the book in Revelation, and John talks about living on this earth versus what's coming when Jesus returns, and he calls this earth Babylon. See, Babylon is any place where you live that is moving in the opposite direction of Jesus. So what does that make our country? We're in Babylon. Because our country is not moving towards Jesus. It's moving away from him. And we're stuck in a spot where we have to figure out what it means to be a kingdom of heaven, be a part of the kingdom of heaven and the kingdom of earth at the same time. Well, we're just going to fly into the book of Daniel real fast, and we're going to get out of it pretty quickly, okay? I want to remind you that Daniel was not the only one who was taken captive. There were many others taken captive. 3 of those were his friends, and his friends' names were Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Daniel and his 3 friends are part of what's the group of people taken into captivity. And when they're taken, just 5 things that we see when Babylon and King Nebuchadnezzar bring them out of Israel. 1, they're taken captive. 2, they're prepared to be slaves to the king. Their life's about to change forever. They're going to be slaves in Babylon for the rest of their lives. 3, they're given new language and new literature to read. They're no longer going to speak Hebrew. They're going to speak Aramaic. They're given a new language that they have to learn. 4, they're told to eat and drink from the king's table. And 5, they're given new names. And if you were here in week 1, I said, wouldn't it be weird to have the same name your whole life and then one day wake up and told you'll never be called that again? Your name is now something completely different. That's what happened to them. But it's actually a bigger deal than that. It's not just, oh no, I have a new name. In Jewish culture, your name is everything. Your name speaks to who you are and what matters and what your parents wanted to speak over you when you were born. So let me tell you what let me just show you. Daniel means God is my judge. Hananiah means God has favored. Mishael, who is what God is. That's a cool name. Like, who is what God is? And then Azariah, Jehovah, another name of God. Jehovah has helped me. He's my helper. Those are really powerful names, and they're a part of the way the Jewish culture talks about the Lord. That's why a lot of the Jewish names end in IAH. Have you noticed that? Or they end in EL. The reason is because IAH is signification of Yahweh, what the God of Israel was called, and EL is the signification of Elohim, which is one of the other names of God. I mean, they were adding the names of God into their names because their names had so much power and importance to them. But all 4 of them got new names when they got to Babylon. Here were their new names: Belteshazzar, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, which means new meanings for their names. See, Daniel was now called Belteshazzar. Bel, protect the king. Bel is the ultimate god of Babylon. He's the god of the sky. In other places in Scripture, he's referred to as Baal instead of Bel. But instead of being God is my judge, Daniel is now Bel protects my king. Shadrach, command of Aku. His name used to mean God has favored. And now his name means I'm commanded by the moon god of Babylon. Aku is the moon god. I mean, they're changing some important things. Meshach, his name used to mean who is what God is. And now his name means who is what Aku is. Man. And then Abednego. His name used to mean Jehovah has helped. Now his name means servant of Nego. Nego is the Babylonian god of fire. And Abednego is a servant of him now. Interestingly enough, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego end up in fire, don't they? And it's not Nego that helps them. It's the God of Israel. You'll also see that throughout Scripture, God will change the name of a person to signify a change in their relationship with him. I mean, God changes names, doesn't he? Abram becomes Abraham. Sarai becomes Sarah. Jacob becomes Israel. Fast forward to the New Testament. Simon becomes Peter. God changes names to signify things. And what I want you to see really quickly is that Babylon will always desire to take the role of God in your life. This place, this earth, will always try to do things that God is supposed to do. See, Babylon's changing names now because Babylon's in control. Babylon will always try to be your God. This country will always try to be your God because it's Babylon. Your work will always try to be your God. Your bank account will always try to be your God. Because that's what things of Babylon do. That's how it works. So bottom line is that it wasn't simply a name change. It was their identity. Everybody say identity. It's an important word this morning. Their identity was found in their name. It wasn't just a name change. The Babylonian people were trying to change these men's identity and how they saw themselves and how they saw the world around them. But can I tell you something? Our identity was determined in Genesis chapter 1. I mean, we go all the way back to the beginning. God says, let there be light. We eventually get stars and moon. We eventually get animals on the ground. We get water. We get fish, birds. All these things happen. And then all of a sudden, Genesis 1:27, it says this. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. See, our identity was determined in Genesis chapter 1 when God determined that we would be made in his image. Our identity is that we're made in the image of God. In fact, if you go to Genesis chapter 2 even, we get even more detail. It says that after God spoke all these things into existence, God takes his hands and puts them in the soil and begins to form man. I mean, God gets his hands dirty when he makes us, because he wants to be such an intimate part of how we were created. In fact, the name Adam, or Adamah in Hebrew, simply just means from the dirt. That's who he is. God forms us, every piece of us touched by his fingers and his hands, as he makes humanity. We are image bearers of the God who created and rules all things, and that is our identity. We're image bearers of the God who's created and ruled all things. I think Jesus has a similar conversation. We're going to spend the rest of our time today in Matthew 22, in case you want to thumb ahead in your scripture. We're going to spend the rest of our time there. But Jesus has another interesting conversation about what it means to be made in the image of God, I think in Matthew 22. But just to catch you up, in Matthew 21, this happens. Jesus rides into town on something we call Palm Sunday. Okay, he's coming into town on a donkey. They're waving palm branches. Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Everyone's super pumped because they think Jesus is going to save the day. And then all of a sudden, they don't like what he's saying. And the Pharisees start to pick at him a little bit. And they say, under whose authority do you say these things? They want to know, who do you think you are? Jesus begins to tell them parables. And every parable is basically a slap in the face at the Pharisee. I mean, at one point he says in a parable, and that is why there are prostitutes who will enter the kingdom of heaven over the religious. And they're looking at each other and they're thinking to themselves, how do we get rid of this guy? We got to get rid of this guy. So, in Matthew 22, starting at verse 15, it says this, then the Pharisees went out and laid plans to trip him up in his words. See, he hasn't done anything wrong, but maybe we can get him to say something crazy. And then we can arrest him. Trip him up in his words. Verse 16, they sent their disciples, the disciples of the Pharisees, to him along with the Herodians. Herodians were Jewish people who were bought into the political system of Rome and were followers of Herod Antipas, who was the guy who was leading the area at the time. So these are Jews who are acting like Romans. Okay? So the disciples and the Herodians, teacher, they said, we know that you are a man of integrity and that you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. You aren't swayed by others because you pay no attention to who they are. Man, they're laying it on thick. They're trying real hard. Come on, you can trust us. We know how amazing you are. Tell us, right? Then they said this, tell us then, what is your opinion? Is it right to pay the imperial tax to Caesar or not? I mean, I know that sounds like a weird question, but they're really trying to trap him. Because if he says, yes, it is right to pay the tax, all the Jews are going to hate him. If he says, no, it's wrong, the Romans will arrest him. He's in a lose-lose situation. But this tax stuff has been an issue for the Jews since the Romans took over. You go back to AD 5 AD, and you'll find a man there named Judas of Galilee. And Judas of Galilee decides, after there's a census taken, and every single person, every man, every woman, and every child is required to pay the same exact tax. Judas of Galilee says to himself and to his followers, we're not doing that. The only person we're responsible to is God. We should go kill the Romans. And his buddies are like, sounds like a plan. So Judas and his friends, not the Judas who was a disciple, Judas of Galilee, they go and they attack the Romans. They all died because they couldn't defeat the Romans. But a remnant of them stuck around and started to build this group of people who were much more militant in the way that they followed God. Those people are eventually called zealots. And it started with this one guy, Judas of Galilee. He's also in Scripture, by the way. In Acts chapter 5, there's a speech given by a Pharisee named Gamaliel, and he mentions Judas of Galilee as one of the people who was a Messiah-like figure who didn't work out. So he's in Scripture, he's also in history, in other places. But Judas of Galilee tries to get the tax taken away, and this is probably 25 to 27 years before these Pharisees are asking Jesus. But taxes is part of the story of Jesus, to be honest with you. When Jesus is born, it says there was a census taken. They were counting people to pay taxes. Jesus goes and gets disciples. One of them is a zealot. He's asked this question about taxes. In fact, at the end of his life, before he's put on the cross, there are some leaders who are saying to them, Jesus isn't paying his taxes, and that's why we should arrest him. It's just a thread that moves all through the life of Jesus. So should we pay the imperial tax to Caesar or not? Jesus responded in verse 18. But Jesus, knowing their evil intent, said, "You hypocrites, why are you trying to trap me?" He knew what they were doing. And guess what he does? He answers them anyway. He's like, "You hypocrites." Okay, here's your answer, which is crazy. Okay, this is what he says. "Show me the coin used for paying the tax." They brought him a denarius, and he asked, "Whose image is this? And whose inscription?" So he asked for a coin. This is a quarter. Who's on our quarter? Y'all been out of school for a while, huh? Or you just been using Apple Pay for so long you forgot what a coin looks like? Who's on the quarter? George Washington, our first president. The face of a man on a piece of metal somehow makes it currency. The face of the Caesar on the coin somehow makes it currency. So whose image is this and whose inscription? A denarius was a typical 1 day's worth of wage for a worker. Whose image is this? Their response, Caesar's. And Jesus says this. Then he said to them, "So give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give to God what is God." Whose image is this? It's Caesar's image. Well, then give to Caesar what's Caesar's, and give to God what's God's. See, that should cause us to pause and ask two questions. The first is this: well, what is Caesar's? And the second, what is God's? Like, I'm supposed to give to Caesar what's Caesar and give to God what's God's. What's Caesar's and what's God's? Well, let's start with what's Caesar's. But before we do that, I don't think the question is what is Caesar's and what is God's. I think the question, because he asked to look at the coin, is what is made in the image of Caesar and what is made in the image of God. So what's made in the image of Caesar? Well, the coin, right? Which represents wealth, which represents power, which represents things of this world that will eventually die. See, all those things just give to Caesar what's Caesar's. Things of this earth. Things of this earth belong to the earthly kingdom, right? Things of this earth just belong here. They belong to the earthly kingdom. They will eventually fade. They will eventually die. There's nothing on this earth that will last forever. They will eventually die. Things of this earth belong to the earth. Okay, so then what's made in the image of God? I mean, if all that's made in the image of Caesar, what's made in the image of God? Well, in Genesis chapter 1, which we've already read, it says this: let us make mankind in our image. Right? See, what's Caesar's is everything of this earth. But if you're curious, what's it made in the image of God? You are. It's you. And it's me. You are made in the image of God. Whether you see it that way or not, whether you've forgotten, because I think we get confused a lot. I think we're trying really hard to find our image in other places. Your image could be in the fact that people like you, or you're really intelligent, or you're a hard worker, or you have money. None of that is God. See, you are the one who's made in the image of God. You are in his image. That is where our identity is found. And if you have money, great. If you have a great work ethic, great. If you have a great family, great. But understand this: anything good in your life comes from him. It is not you. Well, I have a college degree that I worked for, and Jesus didn't write any of the papers. Or, well, I'm the one who manages my finances, and I'm the one who's invested well. I made those decisions. Jesus didn't. Y'all hear me? Hear me. Everything good comes from Jesus. Let me tell you why. Because the only reason you have a brain is because he gave you one. The only reason you have a body is because he gave you one. And no matter what is good in your life, and stop comparing it to the other people, whatever's good in your life comes directly from him. You are made in his image, and that's why you have good things in you. Because of him, not because of you. And he may not have written any of those papers, but he gave you the ability to write a paper. It's who he is. It's what he's done. So what's our response? How do we respond if I'm supposed to give to God what is God's, and that's me, and everything good in me comes from him, what am I supposed to do? Well, what you're supposed to do is give to God all of you. All of you. Not some of you. Not portions of you. Not just Sundays of you. All of you. If we're being real honest in this place, I want to just pull up a chair right now. If we're being real honest in this place, giving God all of ourselves is like the hardest thing in the world. But it's what's required. So, Pastor Tim, how do I do that? And how is there this requirement when I know I'm never going to reach it? Journey with Jesus. And when you fall forward and keep going. And you may never be able to give him completely all of you. But that's the journey we're called to. He's worthy of all of us. All of us. There may be someone in this room today that if you're being real honest, you're not a follower of Jesus. You're just like showing up. You're doing the church thing. And you're hoping like it helps you be a good person. Let me just burst your bubble. You're not a good person. And neither am I. We're not good. Okay? We are not good people. But by the grace of God, He is good. And when He lives in us, people see good things in us, but those good things are not actually us, they're Him. That's how it works. You're not going to like magically be a better person by just showing up at church. Jesus is trying to call you into a relationship with Him. If you've been with us long enough, you know that we do these things called car conversations. Just a way to have a conversation on the way home or over lunch with people. Even if your child is in Kidsman right now, they're learning the same stuff. You should be able to have a conversation with them on the way home. I don't know what you'll get from them, but you could have a conversation with them. 2 questions stuck out to me. The first is this: what do you see in your own life that's good? What do you see in yourself that's good? Because it's from God. We don't do a good job looking at ourselves and finding good, do we? We're really good at finding bad. We like to look at our mistakes. We don't do a good job finding good. What's good in you because God gave it to you? The second question is this: what do you see in the other person? And what I mean by that is the other person you're talking to in the car. Parents in the room, can I tell you, looking at your child and speaking good into them is powerful. When you look at your child and you say, this is what I see in you, this is the good I see in you, it's powerful. I'm trying to give you an opportunity to do that this morning. The bottom line today is simply this: when we embrace that our identity is found in the image of God, our response should be to give back to Him our entire self. Our entire self. Why? Because we are a part of 2 kingdoms, but only one can be your home. And only one holds your identity. So is it here? Or is it the home that you've never been to? Only one holds your identity.